Hello, everyone. Welcome to Art History once again. I'm sorry I can't be with you, but it pains me to not be with you, but never fear, I will be there before long. So we're going to have quite a bit of architecture today. Here's the vocabulary for today, all architecture. We have the aisle, transept, radiating chapels, ambulatory, ribbed vaulting, the pointed arch, which we've talked a little bit about. Now we get to see how the Islamic art influences the European art. Flying buttresses, tympanum, Romanesque, Gothic, and Pieta. Oh, Pieta is not an architecture term. No, that's the only one that's not. Okay, so now we're going to first talk, though, about the Bayeux Tapestry, this amazing work of art. But before we get to that, we're going to do a little review of narrative devices. Just as a reminder, if we were to look at the Trajan's column, remember we talked about the crowding of space, how it creates tension. We had some repetition of figures as another narrative device that was used. We also have this sarcophagus from the late Roman Empire that also has the super crowded space that creates the tension, and also the dramatic light and dark created by the very deep carving. Super dramatic. Yeah, so we have more narrative devices as we move forward here with this piece. So the Bayeux Tapestry was made in Romanesque Europe. It's actually not a tapestry. That's the first thing you should remember about it. It's an embroidery. A tapestry is something where cloth is woven. This is where you've taken cloth that's already been woven and take embroidery and put it on. So this is a piece of embroidery. And it is the story of the Normans, William the Conqueror, overcoming Harold of England, who becomes king. So what happened was the old King Edward died, but he didn't have an heir. And there were two guys that contested the throne, and that was Harold, who was English, and William, who was Norman, that is French. So in this work, Harold is initially vowing his allegiance to William, but then crowning himself. And then William gets word of this and goes berserk and goes to battle against Harold. So the interesting thing about this is it was designed by the French, but it was executed by the conquered English. So you can see little hints of this kind of prejudice put into the piece because the conquered peoples actually made this record. Harold is shown as king in the work. In the writings, Normans never described him as king. He described him as a tyrant or a usurper, but never as a king. So that's interesting. Also, Halley's Comet makes an appearance, and that is supposed to be a foreshadowing of the inevitability of William's takeover. So this was made by women, British women, who, of course, we do not have their names, but it was made by a group of women. So let's take a look. I have here, well, first, before we do that, I have here some narrative devices. We're talking about narrative devices. So there are animals in this little area margin is at the top here. They decorate and reflect the events in the main story. But take a look at the poses of the figures. They are telling a story with position and posing, just like acting. If there is a high contrast, light and dark, that draws the eye in, so main figures tend to have this high contrast. You can also see different ethnicities indicated by the hair and clothing. There are also actually captions along here too, which tells what's going on. The buildings, the environment, and the furniture all indicate details about how people lived at the time, which is really cool. Also, we've got a hieratic scale, the size of the character as indication of his importance. And occasionally you see these weird ornamental dividers here, that like weird trees or something. So those are just sort of to divide one scene from the next. And it's really interesting at the bottom, there is this margin here that has details about life at the time. Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the story, but like here we have people sowing seeds in a field. And of course, the use of space, as we saw at Trajan's column, the idea of more tense things, are you going to have the characters closer together? Okay, and so now I have for you a really cool video that is an animation of this embroidery, so you can see it from one end to the other. I'm just going to go ahead and play that here. Okay, so there you go. I love that video. All right, let's move along here. There are some of the scenes. Yeah, very much like the attack in Sanjo Palace. Very long and tells a story. Okay, now we're going to get into some architecture. Romanesque and Gothic architecture. This is pretty exciting stuff, in my opinion. We taught the way this Christian architecture evolved was all about making pilgrimages, religious pilgrimages. So we could talk about the Great Stupa of Sanchi as a place that pilgrims went to as a sort of a religious devotion. We have the same thing developing in Christianity. Also, religious pilgrimages to the Kaaba for the Muslims. So what we have is we have the idea of pilgrimages for I'm sorry, to see the remains, the relics. Sorry, I lost that word there for a second. The relics that of the saints, basically. So churches sort of became competitive in getting people to come into their church. And as you know, people, when they come into churches, they make donations to the church. Is sort of seen as a way of getting into heaven. If you do good deeds, such as giving to the church, you will get into heaven. So you want people, the religious leaders realized how important it was for people to come into their church in order to be able to sustain their church and to spread the word and convert more people. So these religious pilgrimages by the Christians became super important. And in order to have religious pilgrimages, what you need relics, because then people come from far and wide to see the relics. Seeing relics is supposed to sort of make you more likely to have a connection with God, and it's just seeing the relics is sort of a blessing. So here we have Santa Sabina, which we studied before. And as you can see, there's really no place to put the relics. It's hard to, where would you put them so people can see them? Also, there's, the Eucharist going on at the altar, so you don't want to interrupt that. You need a way of people getting in and out of here without interrupting things. So we have the beginning of the establishment of the Romanesque church, and we have these little blobs added to the church. These are radiating chapels. So radiating chapels are added, and also this area in the apse here is called the ambulatory. So the ambulatory is added so that people can come in and see the relics, which are each in these radiating chapels, without interrupting the ceremony that's going on in the middle. Also, more entrances to the church. Instead of just having this narthex at the entrance of the church, you also have entrances on these two new places. Not only that, the plan of the church now becomes a cross, which is a very powerful Christian symbol. So this is how the church evolved. So here we have the additions: the ambulatory here, and then the radiating chapels and the transept. And then you still have the narthex at the base here. So this is the beginning of the Romanesque church. And so there's the plan that you would have before that, with just the apse and the narthex and the side aisles. We still have side aisles, but we also have this ambulatory here. And so here's the interior of that. It's a little different. And here is Santa Sabina, of course, and here's St. Foy, which is the church that has notice the cross right here, the transept right here. So an entrance there, an entrance over here, an entrance here, and an entrance here. A beautiful church. And then you've also got you can't really see them here, but you've got these radiating chapels. There's another picture of them. So this is the beginning of the Romanesque church. And there's the plan. Okay, and then we moved from the Romanesque, we get into the Gothic. So the Gothic piece that we have on ours is the Chartres Cathedral. And you can see that there is even, it's a little more complex when we get to Chartres Cathedral. So then with this transition from the Romanesque to the Gothic is really interesting. And it involves the use of the pointed arch. So it's just a huge change. And the pointed arch, what it does is it redistributes the weight from above that allows them to make higher ceilings, and it also allows the walls to be thinner, which allows stained glass. So that's really interesting, a huge change. So let me show you. I want to show you a video about the change from the Romanesque to the Gothic, and this is a Smart History video. Is not actually the particular cathedral that they're showing you is not on our list, but the things that they talk about, which is lux nova, the idea of light being God, is very appropriate for what we're studying. So don't be confused by the fact that it's not actually the exact church that we are studying. Is just another Gothic church. So let's listen to this.
Here we are at the Basilica of Saint Denis,
the birthplace of the Gothic.
Thanks to Suger, who was the abbot in the first half of the 12th century. This church is incredibly important because it's the burial place of the royal families, and Suger himself was also an advisor to the royal family.
We're standing in the choir, and light is pouring in the windows.
So the choir is the space behind the altar of the church, and the ambulatory is the aisle that would take one behind the altar.
Actually, it's taking us around behind the altar.
Now, Suger completed the ambulatory and also the facade of the church.
And none of this was new construction. There had been a 9th century church here, and Suger felt that it was inadequate as the burial place of the kings. At this historical moment, the kings of France only really controlled the Ile-de-France, that is the area immediately around Paris. But this was a time when the king's power was expanding, and Suger really wanted to create an architectural style that would express the growing power of the monarch. Now, in the history of Western church architecture, the way that this would generally work is you would have an ambulatory that would move around the back of the altar, and that would allow pilgrims to stop at each of these small radiating chapels, that is, these small rooms that would contain relics.
In the past, during the Romanesque period, these chapels would be literally separate rooms with walls around them. And Suger's idea was instead to open up the space and to allow light to flood in. And that's exactly how this looks. And it must have looked so different than anything anyone had seen before.
Instead of this looking like a set of walls that are pierced by windows, and in the Romanesque, relatively small windows, instead he's figured out how to engineer this structure in stone so that the walls can basically disappear and be replaced by glass, colored glass that lets this brilliant, luminous color into the space. So let's talk about two things: how he did this, and second of all, why he did this.
Yes. Which one should we do first?
Well, let's talk about how he did it. If you look above us, there's this complex web of interlocking, pointed vaulting.
Pointed arches are really key here because, for one thing, you can cover spaces of different shapes and sizes. Perhaps most importantly, a pointed arch doesn't push so much out as it does down. And because of that, the architect didn't need to build thick walls.
A traditional Roman arch generally has to be placed on quite heavy walls because it really does push outward. It splays. What the pointed arch does is it tends to take the weight of the vaulting and push it more straight down so that the weight doesn't have to be buttressed from the side.
Looking up at those ribs, we have a sense of a pull toward the vertical, and all of these ribs and this vaulting rests on these thin columns. So there's a real sense of elegance and openness to this space.
And it's so radically different from the Romanesque that came before, which felt so solid and where your eye was always drawn around that rounded arch back down, and you felt the sense of gravity, you felt a sort of rootedness with the Romanesque, and it's so different here. You have to remember the church itself, any consecrated church, is an expression of the Holy Jerusalem. It is heaven on earth. And so the idea is, how can one transport us to a more heavenly place, to a more spiritual place? Abbot Suger believed that light could do this.
Suger thought he was reading the writing of Saint Denis, of the patron saint of this church.
Instead, he was reading a philosopher from the 6th century. But the important part is he took this notion of the divinity of light from that writing and made that practical and applicable within an architectural setting.
Right, that writing that he thought was by Saint Denis talked about how light was connected to the divine. So what Suger wanted was to open up those walls and allow in the light that would allow a type of thinking on the part of the visitors where they would move from the contemplation of the light to God.
This was a radical and new notion and actually flew in the face of other theological theories of the time. I mean, if you think about the ideas that are being established by St. Bernard of Clairvaux, who's saying we have to get rid of all the decorative. We have to get rid of everything that will distract us. Suger is moving in the other direction and saying, no, in fact, we can transport people.
That the visual is not a distraction, but a way of transporting us to the divine.
I have to say that I think Suger was incredibly successful. This is startlingly beautiful, and I feel transported.
Okay, there you go. So let's go back here. And so here's the exterior of those two. Notice the Gothic on the right there. This is Chartres Cathedral. It's asymmetrical. One tower is higher than the other. So that was the style. The Gothic has that, and it's just the way they liked it. And it sort of came and went. And so here you have the exterior. So this is Chartres Cathedral, just a huge cathedral that was built over a long period of time. Remember, we're not using concrete anymore. We're all about stone. So it takes a long time to build. But you can see different influences of different eras as they were building it. So here's another really important architectural element that helps them to make these thin walls, thin, tall walls. Besides the pointed arch, which was super important, as they said in that video there, we also have these flying buttresses. So flying buttresses, in the Romanesque, they had buttresses that were just flat against the wall. These splay out from the wall, and they go quite a ways out, and they support the wall. So you can make the wall really thin, and more importantly, you can make big holes in it where you put your stained glass, and the stained glass is gorgeous. So here is the interior comparison here of the Romanesque on the left and the Gothic on the right. And you can see it just really opens the space up. These groin vaults, they're basically pointed arches that cross, and they open the space up and allow those thinner walls. Chartres Cathedral was recently restored. I got to see this. I have not seen it. But of course, over the ages, the walls turned black. You can see this area here where it still is really dark. And this is the part of the restored area here. So beautiful. If you ever get a chance to go to a Gothic cathedral in Europe, you should. Here's Macron at the opening of a church there, which was, what was the church? I don't remember. Notre Dame, where they had restored it after that horrible fire they had. Isn't it beautiful? And you have it's Gothic. You have these groin vaults going through here and these pointed arches here. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the ornamentation inside the churches. So Romanesque and Gothic. So here we have, this is the reliquary at St. Foy. St. Foy, the Romanesque church on our list, 58. We have this. So this is really interesting. Relics at the time were thought to have like healing properties, and the churches just vied with each other for possession of the relics. And this particular relic is a saint's skull from a nearby from an abbey. It's a woman whose skull is in this reliquary. It was actually interestingly stolen from the abbey by this church and by these monks. The monks justified the theft, saying that the saint herself wanted to move. So I guess they got it in a prayer or whatever. And so that's kind of interesting. Her oversized head is a reworked Roman parade helmet with a crown added. And the rear throne bears the image of Christ being crucified, engraved into rock crystal, drawing a parallel between Christ's sacrifice and Foy's. So the reliquary was made for the skull, and it's very fine, and it's still there at St. Foy. We've looked at reliquaries before. This one by the Fang peoples of Cameroon, as you remember, in Lobieri. Same idea. You keep the remains of a person in there, and it's highly prized. And here we have here she is. You can see how big she is here, and they're sort of marching her around at some sort of big ceremony. So that's that. And then other ornamentation we have is the tympanums. So the tympanum is a semicircular shape that is over the doorway of the church. So it's the first thing you see when you come in to the church. If you are a pilgrim who has come here to see relics, you see the tympanum first. So the churches liked to emphasize in the Romanesque period of time the Jesus as a judge. So the idea is at the last judgment, everybody is going to leave the earth, and Jesus is going to be there to judge the evil from the good. And the evil, of course, go to hell, and the good go to heaven. It gets kind of interesting. I'm sure artists just really loved the drama that could be depicted with this. And this one is not on our list, but this one is this is one of the most dramatic tympanums that from the period, because you can see over here is people being helped into heaven, but over here we have hell. And these poor people are being tortured. You see these hands over here grabbing somebody by the head, and then there's a lot of torture going on over here. And so it's sort of to encourage you to donate to the church so that you can get into the heaven instead of the hell, because just a reminder that you're going to be judged eventually. So this is the one on for St. Foy. number 58 on our list. This is the tympanum that's there, and it has the same thing with Jesus as the judge. Remember, we had at the very beginning of Christianity, we had Jesus as the shepherd, the kindly shepherd. He is no longer a shepherd in these tympanums. He is a judge, and he's going to judge you. So again, we have heaven is always on the right hand of Christ, which is on our left as we're looking towards him here. And then you have saints and people going to heaven. And over here, you have all sorts of ghouls and people being tortured and all sorts of fun like that. So it's always this division. Now, interestingly, the tympanums change over time. So as we move into Chartres Cathedral, we move into the Gothic, Jesus seems much more benevolent, okay? Gone are the ghoulish things. He's still in the middle here, but we just have some animals on either side, and we have the saints in this area here that is really set in. Down here are kings from the Bible. So this is the king entrance to the church, and it's really interesting. There are kings in the Bible, and depending on when the kings were actually carved into the stone and put there, you see different styles of bodies, which I think is the most interesting thing for us. Yeah, so here are the comparison of these two tympanums. The one here with a more benevolent Jesus, and over here with him judging heaven and hell. And then looking at this king's portal here, you have these different kings from different times. So around 1145, look how elongated these figures are, and look at their feet. Typical medieval figures, right? Long, the robes are just sort of lines going down, little heads, very long figure, and feet kind of pointing down. And then we have this around 1230, we have a change. Notice how the drapery is much more naturalistic looking. The people are facing different directions, not just frontal. And then 1245, again, in this era, you see people look downright classical. We have it moving towards the Renaissance here for kids. So we have people standing in contrapposto, the emphasis on the robes, and very calm expressions. It's very much going back to the classical kind of figures. So that is really interesting to look at. And then, of course, we have the stained glass, beautiful, beautiful stained glass that is made possible, remember, by the by the Gothic form. And the idea that light is God, and all these stories from the Bible are able to be put into stained glass. Again, remember, we're still talking about an illiterate population, so having stories told in a way that people could look at them and remember them rather than having to read them is actually important. And we see a beginning of sort of this emphasis on Mary as a royal figure. Notice the little symbols here of France. I've forgotten the name of it, but you got that around there. And whoops. There she is, the mother of Jesus, with Jesus on her lap, and she's got a crown on. Now she's becoming really a figure that the people can relate to, and she's lifted up more and more as almost status of Jesus himself. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at one more piece here. And that is the Röntgen Pieta, number 62 on your list. So we see, this is the early Gothic over here. This is stained glass out of Chartres Cathedral. Or at least a cathedral around that time. And you can see how very serene she looks. We have this change here that you've got more emotion in the characters of the Bible. So a pieta is pity. Pieta literally means pity, and the Röttgen pieta is from Röttgen, German area. And at that point, there was no Germany, but it was, it was from that area. And this is a type. So this was the Pieta was something that was invented in Germany and then was copied over and over again. But you can see the drama here. Look how his position of his body, the blood coming out of his wounds, and then this look on her face. The most terrible thing anything can happen to anyone is to have a child die, and so that's what she is faced with. And mothers all over the world see that in Mary, the terrible emotions that she has from having her son die, and so he is on her lap as an adult. So this is kind of difficult because obviously he's got to be bigger than her, but in these pietas, he always fits neatly on her lap like her baby did, and so that carries a lot of emotion to it. The idea of the pieta actually originated from 10th century Greek literature, but it was really developed in the German area. And so here we have a pieta from the Renaissance that we're going to be getting into the Renaissance in January. And this is Michelangelo's Pieta. And so it's the same type of thing, but he did his as marble. It's much bigger, and you can see much more naturalistic bodies. But it's still, you've got a much bigger Mary with a Jesus the size of her son and a look of pity. Okay, so that is it for today. I'll see you soon.